Good afternoon, it's 4 p.m. and we're bringing you developing news.
And the stories behind the headlines. This is Storycon. I'm Paez.
And I'm Shawn. Here are some of the stories we're watching this Monday, June 24, 2024. Defense Secretary Gilbert Teodoro says the June 17 incident in the Ayungin Shoal was not a misunderstanding nor an accident. But he did add that the government is not downplaying the incident, which he described as an aggressive and illegal use of force by China. The DND chief reiterates that the Philippines will not seek permission from anyone when conducting resupply missions to the BRP Sierra Madre. Meantime, Chinese Coast Guard vessels have been reportedly spotted within 30 nautical miles of Masinloc, Zambales today. That is according to the new Masinloc Fishermen's Association. The Philippine Coast Guard has yet to confirm this report.
And after 7 years, former Senator Laila de Lima has been cleared of all drug charges against her. This comes after a Muntinlupa court granted her demurrer to evidence in her third and final drug case. Now joining us today, Ana Marie Pamintuan, Editor-in-Chief of the Philippine Star, nagbabalik, and also Storycon's resident political pundit, who is also abroad, Ronald Llamas. And with me today in the studio, it's a Shawn Day.
Yes, the kaladkarin
on One News. Starting from Afternoon Delight all the way to
the big story,
the big story
at 8 p.m. So stay tuned for that. But for now, it is 4 p.m. Hello, Miss Ami. I think Ronald is still unavailable. We're trying to get him on Zoom, but he is busy and I think he is in the United States.
He's in the United States. Ami, on the other hand, we miss you for 1 week. Ami, I understand you just came back from Taiwan. I'm not going to ask about what's on the front pages of the Philippine Star, what's on the front page there, but we will ask you about Taiwan, Ami.
Sure.
What's the sentiment in Taiwan? How's the mood in Taiwan? Ami, is it as hot as it is in Manila as far as this tension with China is concerned?
Ang hot lang doon, Patrick. Happy Monday, Patrick and Shawn. Ang hot lang doon yung weather. It's exactly the same as Manila.
Wow, okay.
If you move around, everyone is going on with business as usual. Yun nga ang tinatanong namin, we kept asking the officials. Of course, they are preparing and they have the resources to prepare. They are ramping up their defenses. They ordered AI-enabled drones as part of their surveillance. Saka defensive sila. They're defensive. Of course, they're preparing. I went around the island, pero walang the ordinary people, wala silang, they are used to all this saber rattling by China. And they tell us stories na if something's gonna happen, it's gonna happen. They're going to invade, they're going to invade. It's that kind of fatalism because they've been living under the threat of Chinese invasion for the past, since their self-ruled island was created. So, yan lang. But of course, yung economic consequences, that one they are feeling because China is employing economic coercion, stopping imports. 90% of their imports of pineapples, for example, from Taiwan has bin stopped. They have ordered the Chinese people to stop visiting Taiwan as tourists. Malaki-laki yun. So the Taiwanese government had to reset its targets for tourism for the year. Binaba nila by 2 million. That's a lot, no? From 12 million to 10 million. Enviable for us, of course. Last year we had only 5.7 million visitors, but it's a big number for Taiwan. Napakaliit niyang
country.
And they were of course depending on the economy. Yeah, that's the mood. But I went to the tourist spots in Taipei, for example, Taipei 101. It's full of people. Locals, tourists, ganun pa rin marami. Of course, nabawasan yung Chinese visitors. That's the mood.
Okay, so I guess, there has been, you would probably call that as a kind of escalation on their part, more like an economic, through economic means, Shawn. So in a way, the tension is still there. There is tension. There are problems.
Of course.
Were people reacting?
Of course, especially now.
Right. Were they reacting a
because
lot
they-
about the new rule of the parliament that they can question any government official? Of course, this was, I guess, apparently perceived to be hitting
Yeah.
the new president, Lai Ching-te.
Yes, there were, I think there were several rallies while we were there.
Right.
There was one before I left. The two opposing sides holding a rally about that proposal, pero I'm not sure. They're going to challenge it. They're preparing to challenge it before their highest court because they're going to raise constitutional issues. Sa atin siguro, because our Congress has been doing it for the longest time. We don't even question the issue eh. Pero eto, nagkakaroon ng tension yun ang tension doon over that issue, Shawn.
No, I mean, going back to this tension in the West Philippine Sea, I wonder if this latest
Yes.
incidents in the West Philippine Sea with China, I wonder if it makes the news in Taiwan. Is it news there?
Yes. Yeah, we got newspapers in our hotel room every day. And there was almost always, siguro, almost all the time, there's a story about the Philippines, and usually it's about the tension with China over the West Philippine Sea. So, of course, they are interested, and of course, they realize that among their friends, yun na nga sinabi sa amin, ng mga officials nila, among their friends in the international community, of course, the Philippines is located closest to Taiwan, so malapit siya na. There are strong ties between us.
Okay. We were watching a while ago with Shawn, the press conference earlier today in Malacanang by the Defense Secretary, Gibo Chodoro. I wonder if you were able to watch it, Ami,
Yeah.
because we can't help but notice it's a complete walk back from the
Yes.
earlier press conference of the Executive Secretary, Lucas Bersamin, on 2 points. Number
Yes.
one, I know he went off script, the Executive Secretary, when he called it a misunderstanding. He was responding to a question from a reporter. But the second thing is, there was mention of announcing those supply missions. Now, Gibo Chodoro is saying, no, there won't be any announcement. What do you make of this, Ami?
Actually, it looks like a follow-through on what President Marcos said. No, na siguro, kinokorek din because of that statement from E.S. Bersamin. Ang lakas ng reaction ng mga tao, no? Coming on the heels of that video na talaga nakakashock. Sa Taiwan ako, na-shock ako eh. Mga bola-wielding, axe-wielding Chinese, no?
Pirates,
Siguro,
tawag nila.
and yeah, the President Marcos already said na it doesn't mean acquiescence. So parang follow through to nung sinabi ni President Marcos, tong statement ni Gibo na no, it was not just a misunderstanding. It was an illegal activity by the Chinese, and they were trying to prevent our troops from resupplying. So this story, I'm sure, made it also again to the Taiwanese media.
Right. Pero what do you think about, ang gulo kasi sa amin, Friday evening yun, tapos biglang Monday at 2
Yes.
p.m., parang magkaiba eh, di ba? Nilagyan lang ng not. Not
Yes.
an accident,
Not
not
a
an misunderstanding. Nalito rin kasi kami nung
Yeah.
Friday nung i-announce. So, kanino kaya i-announce? We were also asking Ray Powell, who we had on the big story on Friday evening. Sabi namin, kanino nila i-announce? Won't it be seen as a capitulation kung in-announce? Ang sabi ni Ray Powell is, hindi naman nila sinabi i-announce sila sa China. I-announce lang nila period to just announce.
Because parang nagpapaalam.
Oo,
in a way.
nagpapaalam.
Oo.
Parang
Which-
nagpapaalam, di nagpapaalam.
Which strangely was the original arrangement, we understand, from the Westcom
Right.
commander, Admiral Carlos.
The old Westcom.
Yeah. So,
Magmamarites ako kasi
Yeah.
hindi ba hindi maganda yung sign na yan. The Defense Secretary and the Executive Secretary are not on the same page talking about this very sensitive issue. Kaya merong umuugong na naman, Lunes na Lunes, bumabalik na naman yung ugong na mukhang baka daw merong maraming nagkaka-interest dyan sa pwesto, of course, ng Little President. Buhay na naman yung mga ganon. Yan, the Marites Grapevine, yan. Yan ang resulta niyan.
I find it difficult, you've been a long time Malacanang reporter. I find it difficult to believe that Executive Secretary Lucas Bersamin's statement last Friday was
Yes.
not approved by a larger body.
Especially since they did say nagkakagaling lang nila sa second meeting ever ng National
Yes.
Maritime
Right.
Council.
Nakasama ang defense.
Kasama yung
Kasama ang
defense.
defense.
Tapos, Miss Ami, dagdag ko na lang sa tanong ni Patrick, bakit kailangan pa ng dalawang separate press con? Di na lang
Right.
silang lahat no ng isang press
Yes.
con either today or no Friday or whenever they thought best.
So my question, Ami, do you think it's the second press conference today, no, that happened today, is it in
Yes.
reaction or is it an attempt to correct whatever fallout was caused
Yes.
by the first press conference?
I think that's exactly what's happening now. Dahil nakikita nga nila yung fallout from, lalo na nakita, we know na may opposition tayo ngayon that's very anti na yung policy nitong current administration about the West Philippine Sea. At sinasabi nila, bakit ganyan? Parang takot na takot tayo sa mga Chinese. So ayan, damage control ang tingin ko dyan sa statement na yan.
Pero
The
in between-
NSA and the defense chief are on the same page. Bakit biglang ganun ang medyo malayo, medyo baliktad sa statement ng little president?
Okay.
Yung isa pa doon na pinagtataka ko, kasi in between the Friday press con and the Monday press con, yung kanina lang,
Yeah.
is pumunta si President BBM sa Palawan para bisitahin yung bagong Westcom. Nagkaroon ng mga ceremonies where he tried to shake the hand pa of Sergeant Jeffrey Facundo,
Sorry.
yung naputulan. Sir, don't
Sorry.
talk.
I just remembered what our conversation
Yeah,
earlier.
pero
kaya-
kasi 'di ba, ang weird, Miss Ami, sabi ko, susubukan ba niyang kamayan yung naputulan ng daliri?
Natawa rin si Ami tuloy.
Hindi siya pero balabag.
Ano na lang, ganun. Hindi, but it highlighted the problem, di ba?
Right.
Na gano'n, na such ordinary activities such as handshaking, mahirap na dun sa injury na yon. Kaya hindi pwedeng basta-basta, Hindi mo pwedeng basta-basta i-downplay yan. Malaking bagay ang nangyari. Kaya lang nga, it's not an armed attack, technically. Walang baril
We'd like to play back a portion of Defense Secretary Gibo's statements a while ago. Let's listen to this clip.
After our visit to our troops in Palawan yesterday, where the President personally talked to the troops involved in the RORE, we have now come to the conclusion that it was not a misunderstanding or an accident. We are not downplaying the incident. It was an aggressive and illegal use of force. We, however, continue to find peaceful solutions to this issue, as pointed out by the President.
So clearly, the misunderstanding,
It's between them.
yes, could apply to
Tapos nadamay
the
tayong lahat.
Executive Secretary's Office and the Defense Department. So parang ganun, ano? I guess...
May palusot naman, di ba? Yung statement ni Gibo, meron namang statement na after they talk to the troops.
Right.
Di ba? Baka naman si E.S. Bersamin kasi, preliminary pa rin yung kanyang report, napanood lang niya yung at may nagsabi na ganito, biglang na-ambush ng mga
Right.
Well, it was not an ambush interview, pero ibig ko sabihin, sinubukan ka ng question ng mga media. Talagang
Ganun talaga,
You have to say
ano,
something.
Kaya
Kaya to say something, kulang pa ng facts, pwede nyo na sabihin ng Malacanang.
Kaya di ba dapat
under the
mas okay?
circumstances.
So wouldn't it have been better kung hinantay nila hanggang today, after nung trip to
Yeah.
Palawan, bago nagpa-press con at kompleto silang lahat doon, lahat nung nasa National Maritime Council or nasa task force.
Yung kasalanan niya ng media, tanong ng tanong.
Oh, yeah. Alam natin yan Mami, di ba? Minsan, pero kasalanan ba ng media na magtanong? I think in managing the
Trabaho
messaging,
natin
no? Dapat hindi na sumasagot ganon.
Yun. Magagalit naman. Kailangan namin ng anong
Ayun,
statement nyo,
oo.
di ba? Considering that, sobra naman yung viral yung video
Ito pa
na
isa
yun.
pa ng reason
Diba?
bakit nag-viral. Kasi si E.S. Bersamin, nung Friday press ko, na medyo hindi yata nag-sit well with a lot of people yung kanyang reaction doon sa nangyari nung June 17 sa Ayungin Shoal. Ito, pakinggan ulit natin in case you missed it.
No,
Well, this was probably a misunderstanding or an accident. We are not yet ready to classify this as an armed attack. I don't know kung yung mga nakita namin is mga bolo, axe, nothing beyond that. Okay, so
It was that laugh.
the executive secretary was responding to a follow-up question from the reporter. No, to be fair, misunderstanding was not that the word misunderstanding was not part of the official statement that was read by the
Yes.
executive secretary. Ganun. Siguro hindi nila sanay amin, no? Si former
Saka
Chief
may operative
Justice.
word naman dun sa sagot niya, probably, di ba?
Probably.
Sabi niya, probably, and at this point, we are not yet ready to classify it as an aggressive,
As an arbitral.
Kaya may ano naman, meron kulatilya.
Oo.
Kaya,
Pero syempre tayo, no? In
Yun
media, yun ang naispatan natin kagad. Misunderstanding. Diba?
Yeah.
Ganun. I think most...
Pero actually, I beg to differ. Ang
Carry
una ko
word.
napansin is we are not yet ready for an armed
Yes.
attack. Actually, mas nag-stand out yun sa akin.
Was that part of the official statement or it was part of the Q&A?
It was part of the Q&A pa rin. It was part of that same sentence where he said it was probably not a misunderstanding, it was probably an accident. We are not yet ready for an armed attack.
Ang sa akin naman, ang nag-stand out dun sa statement, Ami, no, sa prepared statement is that they will inform or they will make an announcement kung kailan gagawin itong resupply mission. So, no? Kasi it's like saying na magpapaalam. Of course, that wasn't the word that was used, but in effect, right? You're announcing to the world that you will conduct, when you will conduct the supply mission.
Pero yun nga yung I think yung bone of contention since wala masyadong detalye, magpapaalam ba tayo o magpapaalam lang tayo? At meron bang difference yun?
Well, at least-
Pag tinanong mo kasi nanay ko may difference.
Yeah, but Shawn, remember, even that part, binawi.
Binawi.
Yes.
Binawi na ngayon. So it's a recognition na medyo sablay din yung
Yung
statement
statement.
na yun. Right? Right, Ami?
Hindi tayo magpapaalam. Clarify na rin yan today. Na hindi tayo magpapaalam. We will not tell them when we are resupplying. Well, in the meantime, dagdag ko lang, meron kaming minomonitor ngayon na meron daw monster ship na spotted near Ayungin, monster Chinese ship. Kaya tinitignan natin ngayon.
By monster Chinese ship, yan ba yung pinakamalaking Coast
Monster
Guard?
Chinese ship.
Yeah. Yung
Yes.
tawag nila, the monster.
The monster.
Yeah, na undertaking intrusive patrol, quote unquote, intrusive patrol sa Ayungin.
Okay, let's
So yan
bring...
yung minomonitor natin ngayon.
Okay, Ami, Shawn, let's bring into the discussion our resource, international studies expert, Renato Decastro. Prof, welcome back to the Storycon.
Thank you very much for bringing me back.
Our pleasure,
Hi, Professor.
Professor,
Okay.
hi.
Uh-huh.
Professor, napanood
Hello.
niyo ba yung 2 p.m. press con ni Defense Secretary Gibo Teodoro?
Yeah, I just watched it.
You just
Very powerful, magnificent.
What makes you say that?
There's no more element of panic. Rather, we see more of efforts to balance. And of course, we see a powerful degree of resolve, element of resolve.
So a better crafted statement than the one we heard Friday, Professor?
Well, the one last Friday is really more of a recommendatory. So, of course, now we see the answer. I guess, I'm assuming that the President spoke through the Defense Secretary, the Acting Secretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs, and, of course, the National Security Advisor. So, again, we have to understand, the task of the National Maritime Council is to recommend. And, of course, the President has basically, in a way, addressed its recommendation and, of course, showing to us that the buck stops with the President. But, of course, the President did not say it. He had to articulate it through the 3 key members of the cabinet that, of course, have to do with defense, foreign policy, and national security. So you see the symbolism of the fact that the press conference was conducted by our foremost diplomat, or of course the military, represented by the Department of National Defense, and of course the National Security Advisor, which is the alter ego of the president when it comes to national security matter.
I did notice though, Professor, that the DFA did not actually get a chance to speak. Is there something to read into there? Hindi siya nagsalita, nandun siya.
It's more of symbolism. Because at this point in time, the message being sent, this is a military defense matter. So this is within the turf of the Secretary of National Defense, but nevertheless, her presence is indication that the element of diplomacy is there to support whatever, of course, the Department of National Defense would do.
But to be fair, Professor,
Professor,
even before, di ba, parang wala tayong masyadong naririnig sa DFA kasi when it comes to this matter, what do we make of it? If we're looking for usually the DFA would have a more sober statement, normally very diplomatic yung wording, but there was none of that this time around since the June 17 incident. You think they're still busy crafting, like really being careful? Ano bang nangyayari kaya?
Well, I think they've already filed a diplomatic protest on the side. But of course, the matter is really of utmost military and national security significance. The fact that it involved of course, they also corrected the statement that was made initially. It's not an accident. No, it is, of course, a deliberate
Professor.
act by the Chinese leadership. Yes.
Professor, by way of self-defense, how do our forces defend themselves from, acts and axe wielding foreigners and ano pa yung dala, bolo. How do you defend yourself from that? Hindi nga natin alam how we will defend ourselves from water cannon. Although high pressure yun, it should be considered a weapon actually.
Well, if you look at what happened last June 17, have you watched the coverage of the Indian press? They go back to what happened in 2017. I think it was in May or spring of 2017 when, of course, you have a clash between the Chinese and Indian forces at the camp, right? The Chinese were carrying gloves with iron spikes, and of course, the Chinese trained in self-defense techniques. So it resulted to the death of 35 Indian troops, including the commander of that Indian forces. So again, when we see, oh gosh, this is happening to us, look what happened between the Indians and the Chinese. And, I tell you, we will expect more from this.
Okay,
Because
yes.
the
Should we
Chinese-
that's the Galway skirmishes?
Yeah, so Professor, I meant to ask if whether in June 17 in Ayungin Shoal, did the Chinese just gray zone our Navy SEALs? It was a calculated deployment of knives, axes, and spears, short
but
of
they-
using armed weapons and guns.
Yeah, but they did not use it. They were just intimidating us. Sooner or later, of course, they will start using it. So, my advice is, let's look at what the Indians did. The Indians also have to prepare. If it has to be hand-to-hand, then we have to prepare. Of course, they have the numbers. That's basically why they are so emboldened. So we have to think of better tactics.
Right, but Professor,
again-
from that incident though, marami kasing namatay. May namatay on both sides, the Indian side, the Chinese side. If papunta na nga tayo doon because hindi natin mareresolba to, should we then prepare ourselves na casualties are
Yeah, of
going
course.
to come?
Yes, I believe we have to.
No,
Okay.
But of course,
ang
we're
tanong,
into a fine line.
do we
Excuse me.
also arm ourselves with axes and
Yun.
axes and
Padahan
bladed
na lang talaga,
weapons?
no?
No.
Hindi
No.
kasi
No.
Professor,
Yeah.
a bladed weapon is a weapon, whatever you say. Di ba? It's a bladed weapon, it's confiscated at the airports. It's a weapon.
So, Professor,
Hindi
yes.
naman yung pangbalat ng pinya or whatever.
Professor.
I
excuse me,
mean,
honey.
kailangan din ba magdala yung mga natin, mga SEALs natin, kahit Coast Guard, it's civilian. Kailangan ba magdala din sila ng ganyan para lang hindi siya being armed encounter kung sakali. Na it's in self-defense, dala-dala silang kutsilyo, saka itak, di magdadala din kami. Pwede ba yan?
No, we don't. Excuse me, we don't. We have our own martial arts. We have our own martial arts.
Okay.
Eskrima.
Okay, we don't need, you can need pan knives, and we could also use rattan sticks. Kali,
Yes.
Arnes,
Oh,
right?
pwede.
Arnes, we have our,
Yeah.
yeah, we have to prepare. Unarmed and armed.
Okay, kasi ang isa pang napansin, Professor, ng mga tao, di ba, na wala ngang, kumbaga yung mga Filipino, they're Navy special operatives, so they're expected to have guns, but none was used, so...
Exactly, Professor. My point being, mukhang sinadya ng mga Chinese Coast Guard na I'm sure maraming baril to, mas maraming baril to. No?
for sure.
Sinadya nilang magdala lang ng mga kutsilyo against our Navy SEALs who are, I'm sure, armed with weapons, guns. Is it because...
Excuse me.
Pero mukhang sinadya nila hindi maglabas.
Excuse me.
Yes.
They're not armed. Those assault rifles were inside boxes.
Okay. Okay.
So they were not armed. They were
Right.
not armed. Oh.
Pero
Kaya
diba-
hinihingi natin,
Yes.
Kaya hinihingi natin yung mga weapons because they were still disassembled. They were inside packages. They were supposed to be, assault rifles that will be delivered to the personnel. So our SEALs were not armed. They were unarmed.
Okay. That's clear. But this whole thing of Chinese Coast Guard personnel being armed with knives is this gray zone in a way? Because how do you respond to provocations from an enemy that is not armed with guns?
Again, we don't need to. Do you remember the press conference conducted at Palawan, where you have the Philippine Navy spokesperson, Commodore Roy Trinidad, saying that the Chinese are waiting for us to use our firearms.
Exactly. That was
And
the point I
once
was trying to make.
We use our firearms, then they would use overwhelming firepower. That is how they've always played the game.
Right.
With the Indians in 1962, they expect the first sight to fire the arms, then they would overwhelm you.
Okay.
They did it against the South Vietnamese in 1975 at the Paracel. They also did it against the Vietnamese in March 1987 or 88. I cannot remember the exact year. They will wait for you to fire. They would intimidate you. Once you fire, they'll use overwhelming firepower and mass and overwhelm you.
Okay. So that is clearly the Chinese tactic in this, Professor. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
How should the Philippines respond then?
Of course, we have to defend. We have to train our personnel when it comes to armed and unarmed combat, but we should never fire the first shot.
Because that would be falling into the trap that they want us to fall into.
Yeah.
That's what you're
Okay.
saying. So now, speaking of those guns na ide-deliver dapat no, sa BRP Sierra Madre, Professor, AFP Chief of Staff Browner has already said nung una niyang press con na he wants to get those guns back. But as of today, parang wala pang any proposal as to how we even begin to getting those guns back. As far as I know, we're not really talking, at least publicly, with China or diplomatically. Parang, kumbaga, puro sulat-sulat lang. How do we even get our guns back?
I think through diplomacy. We have to get it through diplomacy. That's where the Department of Foreign Affairs would have stepped in.
Okay. Do you think we'll ever get them back?
I don't know. I don't know. I have simply no idea.
Fair enough.
Okay, Professor, I wonder if you can confirm this bit of information. Were Filipino soldiers detained and kept in detention for hours after this incident?
I have no idea. You have to ask the Coast Guard spokesperson, Commodore J. Tariala, or the Navy spokesperson. I'm not privy to that information.
Ano ba yung rules doon, Professor, on confiscation? Kasi wala naman silang pinangahawakan. How can they confiscate stuff from us? Na tayo naman, meron tayong pinangahawakan na ruling based on an international treaty. Ano bang rules dyan?
Well, sabi nga ni General Romeo Browner, they're acting like pirates. Pirates.
It's piracy.
Yeah, piracy.
So kung ganyan piracy, can we file a complaint against them? And where do we file that complaint? It's piracy. Kinuha nila yun, ninakaw nila yun.
It's piracy. It's the international community that will have to deal with them.
Yes.
Yeah,
There
we're
are some
announced to the world,
quarters so that don't believe that it's actually piracy because piracy is for personal gain and this daw
Yeah.
does not technically, super technically in lawyer speak, does not fall under that, Professor. Na hindi siya technically piracy but it's like an illegal act of something like that. Let's see.
It's the knives.
Yeah.
I think
Can we say
metaphor
that?
came from that.
You're right.
No?
When I saw those Chinese Coast Guard wielding battle
Right.
axe,
Right.
I said, probably they don't look like pirates. They look like Vikings.
Medyo.
Remember
Viking.
Viking movie?
Pareho din
Vikings,
yun.
But no, the Vikings will pillage you. Pillaging, so kung ayaw natin
Yes.
pillaging.
Yeah,
Well,
pillaging.
they took away our guns,
Yeah.
so
They took some
pwede,
backpacks
pwede.
of food, yeah, and cell phones as well.
Pillaging.
Oh, yun.
So that would be a term, pillaging, right? What the Vikings did
Yes.
when they raided the coast of Europe during the Middle Ages. Yeah, I can't help.
Professor,
When I saw one of them wielding an axe, it looks like a battle axe and it reminds me of the Vikings.
Professor, controversial question, if I
Barbarian
may.
talaga. You know.
Looking back, do you think it was a mistake to use Navy SEALs, no less than the elite of our elite, in this RORE mission?
I think we have been using it. What really surprised us, and I guess this is big, once we started using the rubber boats, that's the harassment stuff. But in this case, the Chinese jumped when we started to deliver the supplies, when we were using those rubber boats. So this was something that surprised the Navy SEALs. Usually the encounters usually happen with a bigger ship. But once fly is already near the BRP Salamandra and being delivered by those rubber boats, then that's where you have this unofficial truce. What happened, of course, is the Chinese broke that truce.
Okay, and we're seeing
So
from
it's
these
not the,
images, Professor Decastro, that the Chinese Coast Guard made it all the way
To the
to
BRP Sierra Madre.
That close.
Yes. That's why the Chinese Foreign Ministry already used the term blockade. This is Chinese. The government has refused to use that term, but the Chinese government is basically using the term. They effectively have blockade the BRP Sierra Madre.
That's right. A lot of people are also, Ray also, I asked him specifically, should we use the B word, which is blockade? And he said, yes, I believe it's already a blockade because if hindi nyo maabot yung BRP Sierra Madre, then effectively it is already a blockade.
So, I think Ray Powell mentioned that the Chinese objective is to actually starve the troops stationed on the boat. Do you share that concern or that idea, Professor Decastro?
Yes, I think the goal is really to starve them, deprive them of. In fact, the AFP called its mission not a military mission, but a humanitarian mission.
And actually, that's
So,
like
Professor, kung
that's
ganyang Professor, if there's pillaging and there's a blockade of our
Piracy
forces at baka hindi can we expect more support from our allies, from our friends, halimbawa, to escort our resupply missions?
Well, the
Ano
recommendation...
bang pwedeng reaction dyan ng international community to pillaging? You don't want to call it piracy, sige, pillaging.
Well, they have to form a police force and have them arrested. But of course, China now has the largest navy in the world. So that's a factor you have to take into account. Let's see. Again, I don't want to preempt because whatever would happen will be an executive decision. So let's give the president and, of course, his key cabinet members the prerogative to make this decision. I don't have all the answers, and I could come out with ideas and like that, but I'm not a government official. I don't have accountability. At the end of the day, the one who will have to make the right decisions or the appropriate decisions will be those who are accountable because of their position in government.
But Professor, right now, like ako personally, as a Filipino citizen, yung concern ko is yung mga troops natin sa Sierra Madre. I'm really worried na never na sila makakakuha ng bagong supply ng pagkain. I'm not even going to the construction materials, but just basic provisions. So, I mean, the government has already said as of 2 p.m. today na dead man na lang, we're just gonna continue. Then you just told us that you can expect some sort of escalation given also the new trespassing rule that came into effect on the Chinese side on June 15. So, I guess, ano bang pwedeng abangan just to prepare us for the
I
worst?
think let's give the president, the government, the prerogative. Probably they're already thinking of something. Probably they're already doing something. Better bet not discuss. Right? We don't need to telegraph or tell what we are doing because this is a matter of almost national security. So, at this point in time, I would basically just trust their capacity, their judgment to make the right decision regarding this matter.
Okay, time to be united. Unity.
Actually, I
that's
wanted...
the message of Renato Decastro,
nga.
Professor.
I wanted to get your thoughts on another matter, Professor, since andito ka na rin naman. A few weeks ago, na-interview namin si dating Solgen Hilbay. He had, he made like a small paper, or he was on, basically it's, his opinion is that we should have, in terms of messaging, no, just one spokesperson for all matters concerning the disputed area. Now that all of this has happened, do we see more, kumbaga, validity or in his suggestion?
I don't think that will happen because you have different government agencies involved. The FAA has a different take on the issue. You have the Department of National Defense has a take on the issue. The Armed Forces of the Philippines. Actually, it depends on the gravity of the situation. When, of course, the situation is really a matter of crisis, that's the time everything will have to focus on the president. But the fact that this issue is still being handled by the Secretary of National Defense, the National Security Advisor, the Department of Foreign Affairs, we have not reached that level. Well, it will be considered really the quintessential foreign policy or security crisis. So it will happen. You don't need to recommend it because it's a natural process. When you have the gravity of the situation reaching a point where it's really a matter of peace or war, that's the time that it will be the president. And of course, once the president starts talking, then we have to be very clear about it.
Okay.
Right?
All right. I'm going to run another suggestion by you, Professor, unless Miss Amy, you have something to say.
Yeah, in the meantime, Professor, China is protesting. Well, they filed a formal protest against our petition for the extension of our continental shelves. Can you give us more insights into this issue? Kasi medyo naguguluhan yung iba dyan eh.
Well, kasi part siya ng natin sa UNCLOS eh. No, through the July 12, 2016 arbitral ruling, the ruling basically states the waters the waters of the West Philippines and South China Sea are international waters.
Yes.
They're not Chinese territorial waters. So we have our 200-mile nautical exclusive, 200-mile nautical miles exclusive economic zone. Then, of course, we are also entitled under UNCLOS for from the 200 nautical miles to the edge, we're entitled to another 160 nautical miles extended continental shelf. When we have, of course, entitlement dun sa seabed. Dun na lang sa seabed. So it has to do with underwater mining.
Okay.
So at this point in time, we still don't have the technology, the companies that can do underwater, undersea mining. So it is for future generations of Filipinos. So what we did is simply an exercise of being a member of the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea. And of course, China, assuming that China is a responsible member of the international community and more importantly, the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, would understand. But instead, China has basically filed a protest and telling the committee to reject, which is actually a rightful exercise of a member of the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea. Vietnam basically already...
Can China base its protest on a law that it refuses to recognize in the case of the arbitral case, the arbitral ruling.
No, of course. First of all, this is about China, no? China is a member of the United Nations Convention that it is blatantly
Yes.
violates UNCLOS. The mere fact it's claiming, a vast expanse of the South China Sea on the basis of the 9-dash line is a violation of UNCLOS. And at the same time also ignores the arbitral dealing. That is the nature of the animal. That's the nature of China.
Okay.
For China, what
Okay.
matters is might, not right.
Might, not right. Okay. What about reputation, Professor? Because the other suggestion, this one comes from Attorney J. Batong Bakal from the UP Marine Institute. Sabi niya, tanggalin daw natin lahat na lang ng Chinese ambassadors. Would that be wise? Would that just serve to inflame them some more? Or make this issue even hotter than it is? And bring it to a whole new level of...
Take them out to jumpstart diplomacy again, right? That's what he's saying.
Yes.
No,
So it's not to,
Yes, thank you for clarifying
Yeah.
that.
Well, I would just advise, instead of declaring, the ambassador person on that, why not just withdraw our ambassador from Beijing? Right? Just
And what would be
withdraw.
the difference of that? Recalling our ambassador versus tatanggalin natin yung mga ambassador nila dito?
Oh, first of all, they only have one. That's the Chinese ambassador. So the process there, of course, is I guess I watched the press conference conducted by my good friend, Professor J. Batong Bakal. Ang take ko, sabi niya, i-declare personal ng data. But of course, it will have implications on our diplomatic relations. What we do, is just withdraw, downgrade our representation in Beijing. So we don't need to declare the Chinese ambassador persona non grata. The Chinese government will probably react by also withdrawing their ambassador. So we will have the same effect. But of course, this will also affect yung diplomatic relations natin.
What do people say? Ay nako, you're sa, duwag nyo, tinanggal nyo pa yung ambassador nyo.
What I'd like to know, Professor Decastro, is that, when something happens in the West Philippine Sea, we usually hear on the Chinese side, we usually hear from their Department of Foreign Affairs, from their foreign ministry. From their foreign ministry. In the case of the Philippines, it's usually the defense and security officials that give statements. Shouldn't we be hearing more from the DFA on this matter?
We do. The DFA, of course, in fact, had, what's the term for this? They had called the Chinese ambassador for consultation every now and then. And the Chinese ambassador would send his DCM.
Hindi lang sila mahilig mag-presscon, I think.
Laging mahabang
Prof,
statement.
gusto namin presscon para may tanong, di ba?
Para may visual.
Mas maganda
pwede
siguro yung
mag-Q&A.
sagot. Ami, hindi.
Pero Professor, pag nag-downgrade tayo, if we downgrade our ties with Beijing, anong impact nun sa economic
Yes.
economic partnership
Good
natin? We
question,
still have
Professor.
an economic partnership with China, and in fact, some of our business groups have already expressed concern kung anong impact nga nun with our trade with China and all this. Marami pa sila. They are heavily involved in our infrastructure development and a lot of other aspects of economic activities.
I disagree with you. The Chinese are not involved in our infrastructure project. It's Japan. It's Japan that's funding youth in their infrastructure project. The Chinese are not involved in any major
No, yung
infrastructure
funding
project.
yan funding. No, you're talking
No,
about
no.
funding. I'm talking about Chinese companies actually involved in the construction of our infrastructure. Pati nga tong kalye malapit sa Philippine Star Chinese company, it's a Chinese company.
Well, but
They
I
are
think the funding is not-
involved in our infrastructure and development.
But the funding is not coming from China. It is probably the
Okay.
Chinese companies that have
No,
been
it's not
contracted
funding.
by-
Yung kumpanya talaga nila mismo.
Well, I guess, Professor De Castro, Ami's question is the economic fallout from fighting with China, for example. I mean, I understand Chicken Joy comes from China. Lazada, all our Shopee and
so
Lazada.
many things come-
A lot,
Yeah,
no?
material.
Everything we consume is made in
Yeah, a lot
China,
of stuff.
practically. So,
when
Professor,
we
Our
fall-
supply chain.
If we fall into that, then we're paralyzed. This is what the Chinese gain to make us economically interdependent with China.
Yes.
So that we will always beg with China, deal with China on bended knee. So the goal there is slowly, of course, decouple
Decouple.
Ah.
not decoupling, diversification. Diversification.
Do you think, that's what I wanted to ask you next, Professor, do you think we have diversified our sources for all our economic goods that used to come from China? Meron na ba kayong napapansin that we're really getting from other sources and actively, like talagang with impact, na masasabi natin, okay lang mawala yung China kasi kumukuha tayo sa blank? May ganun ba?
Have you seen the statement of the Trilateral Security Summit last April? Japan, U.S., and the Philippines.
You're talking
It
about
talks
the Luzon Economic Corridor?
Not only that, the so-called restructuring of the supply chain. That's a message that we have to slowly diversify our economic relations with China and look at in terms of improving our economic relations with Japan, the United States, Australia, South Korea, and even India and Taiwan.
Okay.
So it will take some time.
It will take.
But, we did not fall into the Chinese economic embrace overnight, right? So it's only about a couple of years, probably during the time of the Duterte administration, when we started talking about being totally economically dependent on China. But before that, but still remember the policy of the late President Benigno Aquino up to 2016. As much as possible, let's not become economically dependent on the Chinese. But of course, in the last 6 years of the Duterte administration, you always have the mantra that China is an important economic partner, China is now the most important trading partner, and we have fallen into that mantra. So it's time to possibly look at the possibility that we could diversify.
Yeah.
Okay, Professor
Actually,
Renato.
that's exactly what Taiwan is also doing dahil they are heavily dependent on the Chinese market and their exports heavily dependent. Yan din ang ginagawa nila. They are diversifying because they are feeling China's economic coercion. Even Australia is doing the same. They are diversifying. So I guess it could become a trend. Yeah, and Japan, of course. Well, yeah.
And even India. So all of those countries are diversifying at the same time. So it's time that we find each other and focus on restructure what we call the global supply chain.
Yeah, to be fair, share ko lang din na I do have some businessman friends that they are already diversifying their getting their raw materials. Instead of puro China, kahit mas mura, kahit konting mas mahal sa India, they're already diversifying para lang daw sure because they don't know what's going to happen.
Actually, example lang, Australia, nagsalita dati yung kanilang Prime Minister nung at the height of COVID na indicating na baka lang naman daw the COVID virus came from China. Nagalit ang China, ang ginawa, tinigil ang pag-import ng wine from Australia.
Hindi lang wine.
Ganyan ang ginagawa nila. Yes.
Hindi lang wine. Pati rock lobster, iron ore, and even
yes, lobster. Yes.
Okay.
Kaya,
so again,
nawala yan.
Go ahead, Professor.
So diversifying does not mean the end of the world. It means that we develop greater diplomatic, political, and economic leverage against China's predatory interdependence. Yes. China uses interdependence to really put countries on the defensive.
Okay, so that means the couple first before we break diplomatically, right? Okay, thank you. Thank you for your time, International Studies expert Professor Renato Decastro.
Thank you very much.
Professor.
It's very engaging talking with you.
As usual, always. We feel the same way, Professor. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye. Good night.
Thank you.
Okay. Time for a break?
Time for a break? Okay, we're
Do
going
we
to pause
still want a break or we go straight?
Control?
Control.
Go straight.
Go straight. So what's your takeaway? My takeaway there is that it's gray zone, the Chinese. This whole armed with knives, axes, and sabi nga nila spear pa, no?
Yeah.
Sinadya nila kasi
Because they know.
How will you fight I will
And
fight
there's
back with
precedent.
that.
Yun nga I like
If
what
all-
Professor said when he brought up the Galway skirmishes because everyone's already bringing it up everywhere. Okay, kahit respected analyst or your usual keyboard warrior sa X or Twitter, Facebook, they're already bringing up the similarities. Pero yun din yung takot ko kasi marami ding namatay and it's been going on for a long time also. So, I guess tama si Professor
Yeah.
Decastro, we're in this for the long haul.
Yeah, but I kind of like that it's instead of an arms race, and it's going to be it's just going to be
Clubs. We're back
Yeah.
to the time before gunpowder was invented by China.
Sabi ni Professor,
Uncivilized
no, Arnis, at saka Eskrima, tsaka
Kali.
Kali. Filipino martial arts to, pagtapat natin sa mga ganyan, di ba? And we have a lot of martial tradition here in the Philippines na of our own. What do you think, Ami?
Tinanong ko yan Tinanong ko yan I talked to the Taiwanese Deputy Foreign Minister. Sabi ko, because I asked them kasi ang Taiwan is the original government that filed that 9-line claim Sabi ko, kumusta
11
ba yung
nga daw yun,
yung
or 13.
Yeah, are you dropping it? Are you withdrawing it? Sabi nila, well, it has been their stand. They were not invited to the arbitration.
Right.
And they are not, well, officially, wala silang action. Status quo sila. But sabi nila, ang difference namin and Beijing is, ang Beijing, they resort to uncivilized ways daw to enforce their claim, whereas Taiwan is making friends with us and even helping us. They donate rice to us. Hindi sila nag-export, mahal yung export nila, yung rice nila, but they donate, they help us in any way they can. And kahit nung COVID, sila yung tumutulong sa atin, they stress that na magkaiba yung namin. And in relation to that diversification, sinabi din yun ng foreign minister, we are no longer relying on the Chinese market. So
Buti
maybe
pang Taiwan.
our policymakers should also think about it.
Right.
To
We should start
actively disengage from the Chinese market.
But the spears, tsaka the knives, at least there's a chance we can
fight
achieve
back.
parity
Yes.
with China.
I agree with you. Kasi talong tayo pagka-weapons at missiles ang
kaya natin
pinag-uusap.
pantayan. Diba? Pero when it comes to real military hardware, I think it will take some time before we are able to catch up with China. The largest navy in the world, though, in terms of number of vessels, right? And all that modern technology that they're already assuming. I think they would probably be second or next to the United States in terms of military power.
They are.
And maybe not far behind pa nga, pero tayo very far behind.
Parang it's a matter of, okay, mas malaki yung fleet nila, pero kulang sila ng aircraft carriers. It's just a
Kulang
matter
practice, medyo
mahina daw yung bakal na
technology
gamit.
nila,
Yeah.
ganyan. Pero kung pana
Walang
lang at saka kutsilyo, kaya.
interoperability.
Matipid, Shawn.
The great equalizer,
The great
walang
equalizer.
pulbura na
Right.
sasabog.
Yan. Okay.
Saka may problema pa diyang isa pag gumamit na sila ng mga submarine dyan sa
Ayun.
South China Sea.
Kailan ba tayo? Di ba
Kasi
magkakaroon din naman
nagkaroon ng
tayo
mission.
in the future?
In the future.
Sa Horizon 3 pa yata nakaschedule
Right.
yun.
In principle.
Medyo matagal
It's
pa
been
yon.
approved.
Pero yan, submarine. Isang issue din yan na report nung nasa Taiwan ako. Na may na-detect na Chinese submarine approaching
Yeah.
Taiwan. Isa pa rin yung
They-
pinaproblema
they-
We
nila.
reported on
But,
that here. Yung kailangan siyang i-tow back, di ba? Tapos nandun na lang siya sa
Yes.
surface.
Apparently, it was ordered to surface within Taiwan's
Taiwan.
territorial waters. So as a show of force or to intimidate, I guess.
But there's
Taiwan.
another a narrative that's going on in social media. I don't know how true this is, pero yung sinasabi nila is actually yun lang nasiraan siya. Kaya palabas lang nila na pinilit daw mag-surface doon, but yung totoo daw is nasiraan siya at kailangan na niya mag-surface.
Nasiraan talaga. Mas yun ang actually mas matunog na teorya
Okay.
doon. Kasi otherwise hindi magpapadetect yung mga yan.
Yun.
Di ba? Thank you so much, Miss Ami, on that final note. Thank you for joining us
Yeah.
as usual on
And welcome
Storycon.
back, Ami.
And welcome back.
Nice to
Thank
see you
you.
again.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy Monday, Shawn and Patrick.
Happy Monday. Mahaba-haba pa ang linggo. Ami Pamintuan, Editor-in-Chief of the Philippine Star. And just like that, 5 o'clock na. Join us on Storycon din pala. On Storycon again tomorrow at 4 p.m. I'm Shawn Yao.
I'm Patrick Paez. We are one news, all sides, all the time. This is the Story Conference Group or the Storycon Group.